The thing about the funeral industry too, as I'm sure we've heard many, many times, is that there are some very unethical providers. There are some wonderful, wonderful people in the death care industry, and then there are some predatory ones. And the problem is you just don't know which one you're going to encounter. And trust me, you will not be in the right mind to be able to discern one from the other. So, according to the Federal Trade Commission, the FTC, a funeral is the third largest expense most families will have in a lifetime after a home and a car. And the fact that nobody plans for such an exorbitant expense is what makes it more and more expensive. So pointing out that when you're grieving, it's pretty much the worst time to make any decision. But that is exactly what happens if you haven't planned ahead. So ideally, you plan ahead and you make these decisions when you're well, when you're happy, when things are good. But if that doesn't happen and you have to deal with, like, boom, somebody just died and it's somebody that you love dearly, and you haven't had any time to think about any sorts of, or even have a conversation about what to do. There are several tips, I think, that will help you lessen your vulnerability. One is to, if possible, appoint an advocate. Appoint a trusted friend, perhaps a clergy member, or somebody who is a little bit more removed from your situation, because it gets really, really emotional, especially when you have family members come in, because we all know family has the most, there are deep-seated dynamics that tend to surface, and all sorts of things can go wrong, or they can make a difficult time even more difficult. So ideally, you can appoint somebody who can actually help you and not be as emotionally invested. They can be the person that talks with the funeral home. You can tell them, okay, here's our budget. Our budget is $5,000. And that person, that advocate, can go out and just navigate and negotiate the interaction. Because if you're trying to do, when you're torn apart by grief, that's not the time for you to be comparison shopping and negotiating. It's just not going to happen. The other thing is to be aware of is emotional overspending happens constantly. And something to remember is that the amount you spend on funeral expenses will never equal the amount you have loved or treasured your loved one, ever. There's no price tag on how much you love someone. So you will not right any wrongs by splurging on a lavish casket or a service for your loved one. You will never be able to alleviate any guilt or anything, for things that weren't said, things that went unresolved. You will never, ever, ever be able to spend enough money to do that. So be aware of that, that this isn't the time or place to fix problems. And also, it's not the time or place. You'll never be able to pay enough money to show your love for someone, ever. Knowing this, the Funeral Trade Commission, again, the FTC, realized that consumers were really losing a great deal of money by going through the death care industry, and so they came up with something called the Funeral Rule. And it's a comprehensive list of rules and regulations that funeral and memorial service providers must adhere to under penalty of law. The purpose of it is to provide pricing transparency for consumers who have the right to ask for everything in writing, and they are also allowed. They must be presented with a general price list as well as a casket and outer burial container price list. What happens a lot is in a funeral home is the cheaper caskets will not be shown at all. So so you have to find them on the price list. So if you have if you're looking to spend $2,000, for example, and you just see that, like, when you're walking around in the showroom, everything starts at $4,000, you have the right to take a look at the price list and say, I want to see this one that says this one's $1,000. And there's a whole thing. There are funeral event seminars that are dedicated to the presentation of caskets, the way in which you are walked around, how you are shown different casket options. There's a reason for this. Industry studies show that the average person shopping for a casket buys one of the first 3 models shown, generally the middle priced of the 3. Therefore, it is in the funeral provider's best interest to show customers the higher end models first. And then to make a casket look less expensive, it can be placed next to a much pricier one. Sure, it's less expensive, but only in comparison. Higher end caskets will usually be organized to the right of the funeral home. 85% of people are right-handed and will tend toward the right, with cheaper caskets to the left. And also another trick of the trade is to put the budget caskets, they'll put really sort of derogatory descriptors on these items. They'll be put, if they are on display at all, they'll be put in like a poorly lit basement, or that makes you just feel like, I love my mom, I can't put her in this horrible tiny just ghetto casket, and there is a reason for this. So just know this. Again, there are some lovely, wonderful funeral providers, but then there are some predatory ones. Just saying, these are very, very common sales tactics that are used. Another sales tactic that's used often is, or at least just sort of a warning, is don't mistake kindness for trustworthiness. It is the funeral provider's job to be respectful, reserved, and professional. However, this person is not your friend. He or she is not your counselor. He or she is not the person that you should be turning to for advice. They should be providing you with a respectful interaction, but it's business. It's not your friend. But it's very easy when somebody's kind and you're devastated to assume this person has my best interests at heart. Now, it's business. This is a business transaction. This is not a therapy session. So that's just something to be aware of. Preying on guilt and grief is very common. Watch for manipulative and coercive phrases that are chosen to play on a mourner's grief and guilt. Phrases such as, "This will be your final gift to your loved one. I'm sure you will only want the best for your loved one." This, indicating a more expensive casket or service, is the more respectful way to show, to say goodbye. Or, "Since your loved one was so wonderful, so accomplished, beautiful, beloved, gracious, wouldn't you want to have a funeral or a service or a casket that reflects that?" So, well, of course you do, but what happens is that's more money, more money, more money, more money, more money. So, and also be aware of disparaging or derogatory language used to describe any sort of item or a service. Things like welfare casket, morgue box, stamping the words temporary container not suitable for long-term storage on a cheaper urn. It happens. So, which again, it keeps playing on, here you are, you're devastated, you're brokenhearted. Of course you want the best for your loved one. And to be honest, if you have an urn, if you have ashes, you can go to TJ Maxx and buy a vase and put them in there. So you don't have to go and spend $400, $500 on a fancy urn. Not saying that that's what you need or want to do, but I'm just saying, like, pointing that out. They're remains. They don't need any special container other than something that's going to contain them. So another term that's used often is the term traditional. Anytime you're told an item, service, practice, or accoutrement is traditional, you should understand that traditional actually means optional. So it's not required. For example, you may be told that it's traditional to have 6 wreaths surrounding the coffin. The number of wreaths is arbitrary. You may choose to have 1 wreath or none at all. I constantly come back to the point you should always do what's right for you and your family. If you have $20,000 to spend on a great funeral, enjoy, do it. But a lot of people don't, and $20,000 is kind of an epic amount of money when you look at the other. That's a year of college tuition, that's a down payment on a house, that's a car. And I'm not saying don't spend money on a funeral, I'm just saying spend the money that's right for your family. Don't let somebody else dictate to you what's right for you. You have to keep remembering that, this is your experience, this is your loved one, this is your family. You're 100% entitled and allowed to go home, take a break from the funeral home. Just say, you know what, we need to go talk about this. We're gonna go and have coffee for an hour. People are gonna try and make you make decisions right away. You don't need to make a decision right away. You wanna do it in the privacy of your own family, of this is what's right for us. And you should not be made to feel badly about, if you can't afford an expensive funeral, that's okay. Most people can't. So you have options. That's what I just want people to know and remember, that you do not have to do anything unless it's mandated by the state. You do not have to do anything that is presented to you. It's your choice. What works best for you, what honors your family and what honors your loved one. So with that said, with the funeral, again, lovely people in the death industry, but also unsavory people as well. So you just don't know. It's easier to do this ahead of time, but that's, hey, in an ideal world, a lot of things would be different.